to kind of set the stage for us, because it is really easy for all of us to be people that look at other people and say, oh my gosh, do you see what they're wearing? Oh my, we are like super judgmental people, right? That's what we do. We judge others. We snapshot. So I want to read a passage that I need, you need, we all need this, all right? Matthew 7:3 says this. Why do you see the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me take out the speck out of your eye, when there's a log in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. Now this is a pretty comical thing that Jesus is saying. Like, imagine someone with a log eye. That's kind of a crazy looking dude, right? Or cheek eye, right? Like, that's like a different look. Okay, so, but here's the deal. It represents something. Because a lot of us love to point at other people's junk and say, yeah, look how awful you are, instead of dealing with the junk that's right in front of us, that has to do with us. And so, when we take a moment to take a look at Judas, and we're taking a look at what Judas has to say here, I want us to really, look at this and ask ourselves, how am I like this guy? How am I like Judas, the guy that they called the betrayer? I think about Peter, sitting along with Jesus, having this confidence and said, I'll never betray you, right? And if you know the scriptures at all, Peter blew it. He betrays Jesus, he denies him 3 times, just as the Lord said he would, and all these things laid out. Well, I want to go through a few things. Let's get after this, okay? So first of all, something we learn about Judas is that Judas was called by God. Judas. Jesus picked his team. You understand this? He spent time praying in Matthew 10. He spent time on a mountainside overnight praying for who his disciples will be. And one of those guys he picked was Judas. One of those guys he picks. Just think about that. He knows, he's God in the flesh. He's aware that Judas is not going to be a great follower. He's kind of a bad egg. But he says, you know what? I want him on my team. I want Judas with me. The guy that I ultimately know is going to be a part of my downfall, I want him along my side. And so I think that's really important for us to all realize that no matter how bad you think you are, or how far away from God you think you are in all those situations, if you're a follower of Jesus in this room, if you made a decision to follow Jesus Christ, you've been called by God. God has set apart you and said, I want you. I want you, even if you're going to screw this up for me. That's crazy to me. If you're picking an all-star team, you don't pick the guy that's going to blow it. But he picked Judas. And I look at that, I'm comforted a bit to say, you know what? He picked me, and I'm a screw-up. He picked me, and I've made many mistakes, and I don't do things right, and constantly I'm battling with my flesh and doing all these things. And God's saying, listen, I called you, even if at the end of the day you screw this whole thing up, Adam, I picked you. I want you. Fill in the blank, that's your name. So that's the first thing we see about Judas. The second thing is that Judas struggled with sin. How many of you guys have struggled with sin? Anyone in this room? Okay, because if we're really honest, we've all been there. We've all screwed up. We've all made mistakes. We all have habitual deals that we go back to that, even the Apostle Paul writes, and he talks about, I do the thing I hate to do. Anyone been there? I've been there. I've been in those moments man, why am I doing that again? I know the result. I know where it's taking me, and I still go that path. But Judas was a guy that struggled with sin. One of his sins was stealing. Judas was a thief. There was a moment in John 12. In John 12, there was this woman that came and poured out this perfume on Jesus' feet. This really expensive perfume. It's probably the most expensive thing that this woman owned. And she takes it and she pours it all over his feet. And Jesus looks at the girl and says, yeah, you're doing the right thing. And Judas was mad. Judas looks at the situation think of, he knows how to play Jesus' heartstrings. He goes well, imagine all of the poor people we could have helped if she would have just sold that. And we could have used the money. But what Judas was really saying is listen, we don't sell that. I don't get to take money because he was the treasurer. He was the guy in charge of the money, so he was kind of taking $5 off the top, cleaning it up, taking what he wants because he was a thief. His stealing, his sin was right in the camp with Jesus. And I think that brings us home here too, because think about it, every one of us in this room, we're in a camp right here. This is our tribe. This is where we hang out every week. We get to hang out with each other. We share life. Some of you guys have a really close relationship. Some of you guys have grown up together. You've been in the room. This is a tribe that God has set up here. And even in the midst of this camp, I know that sin is running rampant. There's stuff going on in your life that people don't know about, the stuff that you're watching. And there's stuff that we're blatantly doing and we don't care. But I'm telling you that Judas struggled. We struggled. We look at the similarity here and understand that even though all those things, he chose us and he was in community, he still had them nearby. Jesus didn't say, okay, you screwed up one too many times, you're done. Get away from me. Because I'm sure Jesus knew what Judas was doing. That's the crazy part about all this, right? We think, I have my own questions about Judas. Why Judas? Why was him? You could have picked another dude. You could have picked somebody that wasn't going to blow this. But God, in his infinite story that he was painting, chose Judas and had him be on that team. The third point that I want us to realize, and this one I was convicted about because I think it's something we get caught up in, is that Judas was close to Jesus. He was close to him. He was one of the 12. Jesus kind of had, kind of equate it this way. You've got some of the people that you really know at school, you hang out with, and then there's your really close friends. You kind of got a circle. Your circles kind of get smaller and smaller. He was in one of the small circles. He was in one of the 12. However, Jesus wasn't what he wanted him to be. Judas had expectations of Jesus. He looked at Jesus and he said, this is the way I want you to be, and if you're not this way, you disappoint me. There was this expectation, like we mentioned before, the Jewish people were under the rule of the Romans, and the Romans were not very good bosses and not very good owners, and they were not taking great care, and there was a lot of tension. And so there was this outcry for a king. They wanted a king to come in and overthrow the government, take over and fix it. Make it all better now. And when Jesus is on a cross dying, you got to imagine that Judas, after what all went down with him, and we'll talk about, is that you got to imagine, this is not the guy I want to be following. You're not the guy that I want. He was very particular because here's the thing we can get caught up in. Judas showed up to every prayer meeting. Judas showed up to every Tuesday night. Judas showed up to every Sunday morning. Judas showed up to everything that did not make him a good follower of Jesus. Just because you show up doesn't mean you have a relationship or a good relationship with Jesus. This is a great step. This is a great step. I want to commend that because, guys, there are so many other places you could be right now. And I think it's awesome that you show up. But I don't want us ever to confuse event with relationship or meeting with relationship with Christ. Because Judas showed up to everything. He was there. He was engaged. And another thing that Judas did is he put a price tag on Jesus. He sold him out. If you guys know the story of Judas, he was the guy that goes to the Pharisees and says, hey, here's some money. He's asked, listen, I know where he is. Give me some money. Give me something for that. I want some payment because I did what you want me to do. I found out here's where Jesus is going to be. You go grab him. I'll tell you who he is by kissing him. He goes up and kisses Jesus and gives him away. Because, like I said, Judas was convinced this isn't the guy I want. This is not the king that I signed up to follow. He had expectations that were not met. And so, one thing I think is kind of crazy about Judas' story is that at the end of it all, and I don't want this to be us. I don't want you to walk through all of this. You come out on Tuesdays, you hang out on Sundays, you go to college, you go to all these things, and then you look back and you regret what you did. Because Judas regretted what he did. At the end of it all, he goes back to the scribes and the Pharisees. He tells Caiaphas, listen, I don't want your money. I screwed up, let him go. He said, no, we don't want your money, dude. We gave you the money, you did the deed. And what Judas ends up doing is he goes and hangs himself. Judas killed himself because he was so torn up by what he did, by what he allowed to happen. You know, imagine if on your tombstone was, I orchestrated the death of the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. I was the guy. I don't want that to be us. Because I'm telling you that in all of this, we have Judas tendencies within us. There are many of us in this room that can relate to moments where we have screwed up bad, where we have made decisions and done things we should not have done. And so, what I want us to do in your small groups are ask these questions I had. One of them being is, what characteristics do you most relate to when it comes to Judas? It could be what I mentioned here tonight, or maybe some other stuff that you know from your own study and hanging out in the scriptures. But what in his characteristics do you recognize and say, yeah, Judas, I'm with you. I see where I would fall in line with where Judas fell. And the second part of that is, have your actions this week, have you had a moment this week that highlighted a similarity that you can see in Judas? Maybe you were someone that were really disappointed in you praying something and then it wasn't answered the way you wanted it to. You're like, God, you're supposed to give me the desires of my heart. That was the desire of my heart. You didn't give it to me. When I was in high school, senior in high school, my dream was to go to North Carolina, Chapel Hill. I didn't get in. And I had some battles with God. I was like, man, I'm supposed to go there. That's my deal. What are you doing, God? I had those conversations. And maybe you've had those moments this week. Maybe you've had a moment where you've got some Judas-like tendencies in the things that you're doing. And the last question, this is a desire I've had, if you guys know me long enough, I've got this desire for you, is how can we be more genuine and honest in our walk of faith this upcoming week? Because a lot of us play church. A lot of us walk into these doors and we say, yeah, I love Jesus just for 2.5 hours, but then when I'm done with that, man, back to my own life, whatever I want to do. So a lot of people that aren't honest and real. Man, I would love it if we had people showing up here that were just absolutely real and honest. And I'm not saying that we have a bunch of fake people here, but I want us to be real about, man, I struggle. Man, I don't know if Jesus is the deal. I don't know if this is all what I want for my life. Some of you, this is all you've known. You've grown up with this. You have questions. You have things you're thinking, you're like, man, is this what I want? Be honest. Be genuine, because I'm telling you, if you're just flubbing through this thing and just kind of like just doing the yes, just taking my word for it or taking your leader's word for it, you're missing out on discovering Jesus. Because that's the thing, God wants you to discover him. That's why he's in his word. That's why he wants us to unpack him. He wants us to go after and see and answer questions. There's not a question that he's scared of that you could answer, that you can ask. There's not one that he's like, oh my gosh, I don't want to ask that question. There's no question. But here's the deal, you're not going to get every answer you want. There's not going to be this list that he writes out, okay, you ask me a bunch of questions, I'm submitting those answers in an email, they'll be to you by Monday, okay? You'll get all the answers you need. It's not how it's going to be. But I encourage you that, even in your small group setting, be honest there, be real. We set these times up because I believe they're critically important to kind of us digesting the things that are talked about here and us walking through with life. And if you need a place where you want to walk deeper in life and you want to keep getting a little bit further with Christ, we try to do discipleship groups. We try to get leaders that want to grow with you and walk alongside of you in an outside setting and help you in those moments. So I just encourage you, when you get in those small groups, let's have those discussions. Let's be real. Let's be honest about something that we